Oh, hey, it's good to see you again. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of See It Again Cinema. Our film today is Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, directed by Frank Oz. My guest is someone I've known for her entire life, and that is my sister, Katie.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Katie, you've got a background in theater, right?
Yes.
How much of that involved improv?
Not as much as I would have liked. Now I'm realizing how much I would have really gotten into improv, but
Yeah.
it was usually a warm-up that we did. Or when I taught theater in my student teaching experiences, we did a lot of a game called Workbench, which is improv. So, and now I listen to a lot of improv comedy. So,
do you ever feel like having to think quickly on your feet and improvise is a little bit like being a con artist?
yes, actually. Especially because I'm a prankster. I like a prank.
She was always pulling pranks on her older brothers.
Let me tell you, I just wanted a dramatic way to take off my glasses.
Oh.
So yeah, whenever I'm trying to pull a prank and like trick someone, I always find that like, wow, I really have to go into detail, and the more detailed you are and the more casual you are when you say it, or not everybody likes being pranked, which is what I'm learning. I'm learning how to pick my audience.
Katie
But yes,
Prankster.
Sure, it's kind of conning them. If I were trying to get something out of them other than their belief, then yes, it would be conning.
Okay.
And you have to be pretty good at improvising with what they come back with.
How long's it been since you've seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Oh my goodness. Close to 25, 30 years.
What do you remember about it from the first time you saw it?
Maybe it's not from the first time because I think I saw it several times back then, but I remember the whole family laughing. And so it also kind of cued me as to how funny it was. I recognized Steve Martin and I already liked him. Might have been from Pink Panther. I don't know if he was doing those yet, but that came later.
That came later.
Okay.
Probably certainly, the Three Amigos.
Oh, it was probably the Three Amigos.
I remember when my dad had HBO, or our dad had HBO. I'm not used to having a family member on the show other than dad. Yeah, this was one of many movies that my mom, I'm pretty sure, bought on impulse. Anytime she'd go to the grocery store or the mall, if she saw a VHS movie and it looked like it was funny, she'd buy it.
So I remember it being funny. And I remember it was just like an adventure watching it. And because they're competitive in the movie, I really liked that element. Who's going to win? And they're fighting over this. And obviously there's the Ruprecht scene. That's kind of very memorable.
Anyone who sees this remembers that scene. What I remember is how clever the con artists were. And as a little kid, you're told that lying is bad. But here we're watching this comedy about these two experts who are conning each other or working together to con rich people out of their money. Did this film ever make you want to pursue the life of a con artist?
No, but I remember thinking I'm kind of rooting for one or the other. And yeah, I remember not having as much, if any, empathy for the person being conned. Which is unusual for me generally. Anything like that where the humor is at someone else's expense or the entertainment is at someone else's expense, even though I like pranks. I know it's incongruous. So I just remember thinking like, I'm on their side. Who's going to win? I kept going back and forth between which of the cons I liked and which one I wanted to win. I identified more with the con artists.
Maybe because their targets were already people who had more money than they possibly could ever need. Our empathy went down if they ended up getting suckered. Why are we watching this film now?
Well, I think we foresee it again cinema. We wanted to go back to something that's pretty far back that we've both seen, but that we both have not seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's also shared between us that it's a family, like beloved family movie. So if we mentioned this at the dinner table, our whole family would probably quote it, even though it's probably been 25 years since any of us have seen it.
Yeah, I do feel like the first thing after laughing and remembering how funny it was for us to all watch it was somebody would just all say Ruprecht.
I actually just now remember the scene with Steve Martin getting up pretending to have been healed, getting up out of the wheelchair, and his physical comedy as he's walking, and the tears and fake tears. And
he really is a master of physical comedy. I know that this was the first film, for sure, that I ever saw with Michael Caine in it. You know what's funny about Michael Caine?
A lot.
Is if you say the word "my cocaine," it sounds like Michael Caine saying his own name. Hello, I'm Michael Caine.
I'm my cocaine. Okay, there's a comic to be made somewhere.
Somewhere?
Someone's holding a bag of cocaine, but it's his own face is on the bag of cocaine. Hi, I'm my cocaine. And it's Michael Caine doing it. There you go.
No, this is your cocaine.
Let's workshop it. Yeah, another time. Yeah.
Okay. You've seen many movies and TV shows and plays and things since then and lived a full life. What are you curious about revisiting this film? What do you think might stand out to you?
Almost always when I see a movie, even that has been 10 years since I saw it, there is usually something that I go, ooh, that doesn't land quite right now. Or, oh, that wouldn't be made today.
Yeah.
Not that it discredits the movie as being a good movie, or that I still love it and I would announce that I love it, but I might announce with a little asterisk, except for this homophobia or except for this. So I don't, anytime it's a movie that I haven't seen in this long, especially, I'm like, oh boy, what are we going to see, if anything?
Well, all right. It's time to begin and watch Dirty Rotten Scoundrels again.
There can be only one pro in this con.
Oh, yeah? We'll just see about that. We'll catch after the credits roll. See it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again. Cinema. See it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again.
And then talk about it.
And we're back. All right. You know, it is more difficult to get the cork on the fork than you would believe.
Wish you could have seen it. Wish you could have seen him trying to get that cork on that fork.
Yeah. It's a good protective measure. So, neither of us have seen this movie in like 25 plus 30 years. What'd you think?
It was still very, very funny. Like, I enjoyed it. I was in it the whole time, and it held up better than I thought.
What were things that stood out to you more this time than like when we were just little kids?
One thing that stood out to me was the types of people that they target. Their targets for fraud, for conning. When I was a kid, I just thought ladies, just ladies. They're all targeting pretty ladies, and if I felt bad about them, which I don't remember feeling, it would have just been like, oh, those poor ladies.
Yeah.
But now I see that they are rich, gullible, sometimes kind of hateful, stupid American women. For example, who
knew that there were so many out there and that they vote?
Especially the line when he's like, you were saying you don't think poor people should be allowed in museums? And you don't even get to hear her say that line, but it's as if dropped into that conversation. That's what they were saying. And so that really stood out to me. That's definitely not something I would have picked up on years ago.
I must have been in middle school when we first saw this, because that was around the time that I really got into collecting comic books, and people were talking about how like, oh, you know, if you buy this, it'll be worth this much money someday, and it's this investment and this collectible. The number one scene that's always stood with me is when Michael Caine is taking Steve Martin through his wine collection. The way I remembered it was, oh, you must really like wine. Like, what are you? I didn't figure you for such a lush. And then he says, oh, no, I can't drink these. These are so valuable, worth so much money. It's like, oh, So you buy the wine and then you sell it for a tidy profit. Oh no, I could never sell these. They mean far too much to me. There's something about that linking of value and use that always just reminded me of like what it felt like to be a comic book collector. Because even though I have some expensive comic books, I'll never sell them because they mean too much to me.
But
so,
you've read the comic books.
And that's
right?
the truth. You can read your comic book and keep it too. Although in the early 90s, there's a big fad of bagging the comics, and the idea is you had to buy 2 copies, one to open to read and the other one to keep sealed for value. I guess I got conned back then. But speaking of wine, I'm drinking a Francis Coppola Diamond Collection Merlot from the year 2020. It was not a good year. That was the beginning of many of our problems. What are you drinking, Katie?
Oh, I bought a Bolthouse Farms Immunity Berry Superfood Boost blend. And I've never tried this before, but I thought we're getting fancy tonight.
Yeah.
And I bought it because that looks fancy. That looks like wine.
You really did a wonderful job matching these beverages.
Okay, let me...
Yeah. Okay.
Fancy. Oh, yeah, they look good.
Yeah. So...
Cheers.
Cheers. Here's to cinema.
Ding.
We gotta talk about Ruprecht.
Sure. Ruprecht was a scene that I was pretty much prepared to be, like, to cringe at. And I found that it wasn't as cringy as I thought. So I thought it was going to be a man portraying a developmentally disabled adult, and that the joke would be at his expense. And it wasn't really, because no one in the scene is laughing at him. No one in the scene thinks it's funny that he is like this. And instead, what we're seeing is 2 adult brothers who love each other and are very, very close. And one takes care of the other. And then these women are so terrible, like you were saying earlier, that they were ready to marry this man, this rich, wonderful man, until they realized that they would be having to be a part of his family. And his family isn't perfect. And his family, granted, Ruprecht would be a lot to handle, but they're acting very shocked, very, very shocked by it.
Yeah. And when I originally remembered it, I didn't realize that their con had been used for at least 3 different women over the course of a month. As a kid, I just was focused on how funny Ruprecht was, and I didn't even notice that there were 3 different women who they used the exact same con on. So it feels that the real satirical target is someone who would marry someone so quickly just because they're rich, but would break off the engagement when they encounter a difference.
Right, because you said that it was less than a month, right? Because he had done all this work. There's a scene where Michael Caine is paying out the different people who have helped in the con, and Steve Martin's character doesn't get anything, and he's like, I worked all month.
Yeah.
I did most of the work this month. And you realize, okay, so not only did they con a woman, get her to say, I will marry you, get her daddy to pay for the wedding in Oklahoma or in Palm Beach or wherever in that short period of time. So it's like they were roped in, but just as easily like, I'm out, I can't handle, I was in this for the money. And, well, kind of in it for the money, I guess.
Yeah.
Because if they're rich enough to have had their daddies, but they somehow got some money out of it.
Maybe there's just, there's new Riche and old money. Like, I got the impression that there was something about the whole European American approach to conning someone. And the Ruprecht scene follows this wonderful montage showing Steve Martin learning how to be an urbane playboy socialite. And then they follow it up with something that's completely the opposite. It's almost like Larry recognizes that Freddie, that his greatest strength is perhaps being kind of a bumbling idiot, buffoon. I was pleasantly surprised that was not as tasteless or whatever, or cringy as I was afraid it would be.
And also that montage that you're talking about, just before that, Freddy has basically blackmailed Lawrence, Michael Caine's character, saying, I have knowledge of a con that you did earlier. And so even though Lawrence's teammate, I guess his accomplice, the policeman, is like, no, I advise you not to do this. He says, no, I'm going to do it. What does he say? Something about like, let him gracefully in so I can see him gracefully out or something like that. So it does seem like that was the whole part of the plan, is get Freddy to believe that he's training him to be just like him. He's training him to be just so polished and so refined, and so he can really get those big cons, so he can get those thousands of dollars, to immediately make him do Ruprecht. Part of the deal was, do anything I tell you to do. So immediately get him to play Ruprecht for a month, only to get no money, only to be told how to spend his money, and that's what makes him mad, and he leaves initially. So he's like, haha, that was all part of the plan, and I think that was juxtaposed really well, where we're watching Steve Martin become more refined, and Michael Caine is like, you've done it, you're ready. Are you ready? Play Ruprecht now. Yeah, so the line that I remember most from this movie is when Ruprecht is sitting there with the cork on a fork, and he says,
do you want to hold it?
Yes.
See what it feels like? You've got glasses. You won't damage your eye.
Something like that. When he says, may I go to the bathroom, please? Thank you. And there's that long line. I used to quote that as a kid, but I did not remember the servant guy coming up behind him saying, may I take your trident, please?
Yeah.
Because before he's holding a giant trident next to him.
Which is like a giant fork.
I was also thinking, okay, they're conning women. They're doing some kind of like romance cons. I was wondering about what kind of consent things am I going to see? And it also held up really well. At one point, Michael Caine asks her, may I give you a little kiss? I think it will do this or that. I think that will achieve this result. And there were a couple times where they put hands on women, but it was to such a comic effect, like shoving them into a bush to have a secret conversation. There are all these like potted plants, and he would be very dramatic and grab them by the arms and go and pull them in. But because the plants are all over their faces, it just became so comical. And they're so gullible. They're all, and they're really gawkers, these women. So you don't feel sorry for these women generally until we meet the jackal.
Yeah. Speaking of the jackal, that is something that I think I noticed now is we are told by the French police guy, who reminds me a lot of Remy from Casablanca. He's reading the newspaper and says, there is competition. There's a jackal who is robbing people all over Europe. And they think Steve Martin's the jackal, but he doesn't even know anything about it because he's reading Mad Magazine on the train and the plane. He's not reading the news. That was a real nice touch, this idea that Americans are maybe just more interested in cartoony, buffoonish things. And then maybe sometimes we just want like a loud American to shut up. So a joke at the end about that he plays a mute character. Getting back to Casablanca, it became clear to me at the end that at the airport scene and somebody leaving on the plane, that it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I noticed a lot of just little references, the competition for the gal, just like they're going for Ilsa in Casablanca. It's a really clever screenplay. I loved the first time that we really get to see Freddy and Larry together is in the train car, and Larry's reading a newspaper, kind of trying to keep up on what's going on with the world, but Freddy's reading Mad Magazine, and this creates a nice balance between the two, that kind of a yin-yang kind of thing. And you can see near the end when they're both looking out to the ocean, or when they're at the airport and Freddy's in his white bathrobe and Steve Martin's luscious white hair, and you've got Larry in his black outfit with his slick back dark hair. They do seem like an interesting pairing.
And that actually reminds me of earlier when we had talked about when I said I think what I liked, I focused on the two of them, not the women. Like the women weren't as important when I was watching it, and that's the case. Is it's really about the competition between the two of them, and how one ups the other, and every time one thinks that they've got the upper hand, then the other one somehow comes in and tricks them. And watching them react to the other, you pointed this out while we were watching it, that neither of them can call the other one out. Neither of them can call the other one a charlatan, because if they do, then they have to show that they're a charlatan.
Yeah.
So those are very funny moments when they're both just like kind of angry at each other, like, but we have to keep pretending.
Keep it cool.
Yeah. I didn't remember until we were watching it. I was like, how does this end? I think she tricks them. I think she is the one conning them at the end. And sure enough, that's what it was. I didn't quite remember, certainly didn't remember the final scene.
Yeah.
Where she comes back, totally new character, totally New Jersey, like real estate agent type of thing. I didn't remember that, but I did make a connection to Matchstick Men. I don't know if you saw that movie.
Yeah, this is a good time to talk about what if someone watched Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, what is another movie that you think, besides Matchstick Men?
Matchstick Men, except it is a very different mood. That's a much more serious movie, and I've only saw it a long, long time ago. That kind of romp, I don't know. I mean, I would describe that as just, and this kind of goes back to me wanting to see more movies like that, where it's just a good time from beginning to end. It's just immersive and fun and funny and takes you on a journey.
It's a very different movie, but there was a strange connection of that leather satchel that had the money, but it actually had clothes in it. And I can't help but think that maybe the Coen brothers just had a little bit of that in the back of their mind for the Big Lebowski.
I was thinking Oscar.
Oh, Oscar
with the bag, and they're passing the bag all over, and sometimes it has ladies' underwear in it, and it's supposed to have money in it, and that's the one, Oscar. If you liked this, you would probably like Oscar with Sylvester Stallone. It takes place in one day. It's a unique story. Hilarious characters, a lot of conning.
What's your favorite part of this movie?
Goodness. The Ruprecht scenes are still quite funny, but I think it's probably, it is in the climax of the movie when they are both just really vying to get this $50,000 out of this woman, and probably when the sailors, it just moves so quickly. I can't even say that it's one thing. It's that he tricks her away from takes her away from the gambling table, but then the next thing you know, Lawrence pretends to be this famous doctor, and then the next thing you know, they're up. They just keep pulling her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and I think then the climax of him being taken away by the sailors, but then there's the sailor party, and then so that whole thing where every 5 seconds you're seeing one of them get their comeuppance, and so that's just kind of a delightful, because I don't really care for either of them any more than the other. Slightly Michael Caine, simply because he actually has a conscience about this woman that he finds out is not rich and is not wealthy and stupid and selfish. So I guess, but I didn't really pick up on that when I was a kid because he was just a rich old guy.
Yeah.
So I have a slight preference for him now, but in watching it, I didn't, because it was just delightful to watch who's going to win.
Well, it would have been really easy, I think, to write it to where he was a sleaze and actually did want to go to bed with her, but he doesn't. And I think that that's one thing that helps the film age better, is like, he does seem to have a conscience, like a guiding principle in the story.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
I noticed that they say Freddie's name a lot. Freddie, right? I don't know if that's a character choice or if that was written for Lawrence to say a lot, but we don't hear him say Lawrence or Larry very often, right? When he does call him Larry, he's like, Lawrence.
Yeah.
Kind of corrects him, but it's not even, So I was going to ask you about that, why you think he,
I think
why you hear Freddy so often.
I think it creates a power dynamic. And this gets to my distorted memory of the stories. I didn't remember how much of the story they're having to be in character. And so I don't think he says Larry or Lawrence as much, because in so many of those scenes, he's around Miss Colgate, Janet, and Lawrence is in the role of Dr. Emil Schiffenhauser or whatever. Maybe it's just a power dynamic thing, but I didn't notice it, but it'd be interesting to do like a script analysis of that.
Because you definitely hear it more. When he's even showing him around, showing him what he's supposed to spend his money on, and he's in the museum, and he's like, Freddy, look, Freddy. There's just so much.
That's probably the power dynamic of like a parent showing a kid who's actually not interested in something. He has to keep using the name to redirect his focus or to somehow get his attention.
First sign of a con. If you're talking to somebody on the phone and they say your name way more often than they need to, it always makes me think, you don't need to say Katie after every time.
Well, Katie, thank you for agreeing to be on this show.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, this is your first time on See It Again Cinema, and one of the reasons I love to make this show is I love rewatching films with people who I spent so much of the formative years of my life getting to watch films with them. So maybe we'll have you back for Terminator 2.
Oh my goodness, that would.
Yeah.
I wouldn't remember as much of that movie as I remember.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun.
Sure.
Is the joy of remembering.
Sure.
So,
well, it's a real pleasure, and I'm a big fan.
Thanks. I love you.
I love you too.
Well, all right. That'll do it for this episode of See It Again Cinema, where old movies make magical new memories. Thanks for rewatching, and we'll see you next time. See it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again. Cinema, see it. Okay.
It's funny, I was holding it and then we thought we weren't supposed to drink. And then I
It's okay.